Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Fran, and today I would like to talk about putting the law of assumption into practice. We will talk about how to get out of philosophy and into real life. First of all, I will never advocate something that I haven't tried and tested for myself first. I'm not into theories, ideas, and ideologies. I do struggle with blind faith. I like to see results, facts, evidence. So much so that when I got my degree in psychology, I felt it wasn't grounded in science enough. I felt that a lot of theories had great philosophical value, but little practical use. That's the reason that I felt drawn more towards cognitive behavioral therapy. I believe that the answer wasn't to be found in our past experiences, but in our present interpretation of them. I felt that while you cannot change the past in this 3D reality that we're living in, we can change our present perception of reality, of the past. We can change in the present to change how we view the past. And as perception is the only reality that we will ever know, then how we perceive something is the only thing that really counts, that really matters. So, after my degree in psychology, I did a diploma in cognitive behavioral hypnotherapy. But why am I telling you all this? Why is this relevant to what I'm talking about on this channel? Because none of the things, concepts, theories, and ideas that I studied ever made complete sense to me on their own. There were elements of psychology which did. For instance, the idea of the subconscious mind and its role in creating our lives, and elements of cognitive behavioral therapy, which did change your perceptions, change your perception to change your emotions, change your behavior to change your perceptions. In other words, rather than reacting to stimuli from the outside, become conscious of your own thoughts and actions. And then changing your actions changes how you think and feel. Your actions are no longer knee-jerk responses to external events. Then there was yoga meditation, which showed me that you can regulate your own heartbeat and blood pressure at will. That simply breathing from the diaphragm can relieve tension, stress, depression, and even muscular pain. It showed me that you can quickly get into a positive mental state simply by observing your thoughts from the outside without judgment. Now, of course, as I learned about these theories, little did I know that there was one theory that included all of them, a theory that was consistent with both quantum physics and the most disparate religious practices. A theory which wasn't a theory at all, but which gave specific practical techniques to implement in order to show you how your thoughts and emotions directly create the reality that you are experiencing. I stumbled upon it on YouTube during one of the hardest times in my life, and I decided that I had nothing to lose by experimenting with it. I've never been one to take anyone's words for anything. I'm like Thomas. I need to see for myself. So I started looking into this law of assumption. In actual fact, I first came upon the law of attraction, but it was still too theoretical for me. The talk of vibration and frequency did make sense, but it didn't give me the tools to change that inner vibration. It relied a lot on faith, and in my mind, faith was like a dirty word. So I struggled. Then I came across one of Neville Goddard's lectures, recalled by one of his students. It was about the now famous ladder experiment. It was a proper experiment, like you were supposed to imagine climbing a ladder while in a state akin to sleep, what we nowadays call a state of deep relaxation. Then, at various times during the day, you were to remind yourself, I will not climb a ladder. I will not climb a ladder. Of course, if you're a fireman or scaffolder, you might want to change the stimulus and adapt the exercise to something you wouldn't usually do on a day-to-day basis. So I did the experiment, and 6 days later, my friend asked me if I could possibly help her repaint the fan blades on the ceiling of her apartment. as I had done it before in my apartment. And before I knew it, I was climbing up a ladder. And as I did so, I actually laughed out loud. It worked. And I couldn't have produced this by my external behavior, as my friend came up with this idea all by herself. So I didn't just suggest doing the work for her. She just asked me outright. And then I started reverse engineering my entire life, the good and the bad times, and the thoughts and expectations that preceded them, all of them. I could actually see a direct line between every expectation I ever held in my life and my life events. It was harder to acknowledge the negative events because who wants to admit that they cause all this suffering to themselves? It's hard to accept all this without self-bashing. But that is exactly the opposite of what we want to be doing if we are to transform our lives. Usually, when we are in pain, we blame others in order to feel better about ourselves and our unfavorable circumstances. So it's very hard to be accountable for the state of our life without blaming ourselves when things don't work out as we would have wanted them to. But here is why we shouldn't blame ourselves. When we created these events, people and circumstances in our lives, we were creating unconsciously, according to our subconscious program, as if creating while asleep. In actual fact, we weren't the same people who are now looking at these circumstances, realizing that our thoughts and expectations brought them forward in the 3D screen of space, in this world of form. For all intents and purposes, we are not the same person who created these events. We have now become aware of our power to create, and therefore we have shifted to a different version of ourselves. And what's more, you wouldn't have awakened and realized your power to transform your life unless you went through that deep pain. It's like when you are having a nightmare and it gets so scary that it wakes you up. Your own pain brings you back to waking reality, where you have control over your life. So be grateful for the suffering that you have experienced because it brought you here. And life will be transformed. Your life will be transformed for the better beyond recognition as a consequence. You'll be able to create and manifest anything you desire by the sheer power of imagination and surrender. And even if you are one of those people who, like me, finds it really hard to imagine on cue, you will always desire something. And as long as you don't block your desire with fearful thoughts, your desires will always come to pass. Now comes the hard part, the practical part. I'm not asking you to believe, to have faith, to trust. I am asking you to know that the thing you desire is already yours. I'm asking you to know it when the ego is screaming at you that you're delusional. I'm asking you to know it when your friends think that you're crazy. I'm asking you to know it when the 3D reality shows you the complete opposite. I'm asking you to know it when nothing seems to shift in the world of form. I'm asking you to know it when you feel like giving up. I'm asking you to know it when you wake up in the morning, you look around and nothing appears to have changed. I'm asking you to know it when you have no physical evidence for it. And I'm asking you to know it when your conscious mind will tell you of all the reasons why you cannot have what you want. I'm asking you to know it when your conscious mind will ask you to explain exactly how you're going to achieve what you are going to achieve, or when, or why. But how can you rationally explain bumping into someone new and falling in love? How can you predict and explain winning the lottery, say? How can you consciously predict these things? And the same goes for unwanted stuff too. You manifest in your life all the time these unwanted stuff, but which you could never have predicted, really. I mean, you can predict it now because now you're consciously aware of your thoughts. But before, this stuff just happened and you didn't know how it manifested. So stop asking how and when and why, and simply visualize, think about, or make a wish. Just express your desire. It doesn't matter how you do it. Do you have to teach kids how to make a wish? No, because it's a natural attitude. The whole purpose of life is to turn our wishes into reality. We only experience the unwanted when we focus on fear. And we experience the unwanted so we can know what we really want and what to focus on. When I looked back to my past couple of years, I realized that the subconscious fear of lockdown had brought to the surface a host of other deeper, previously suppressed fears that I hadn't fully dealt with. And these fears were then highlighted and magnified during lockdown. And then I started projecting onto the screen space these same fears, which got magnified and highlighted into my physical reality. And so I started spiraling. I lost relationships, friendships, earnings. Then my health took a hit. And then is when I stumbled upon Neville Goddard and his teachings. And what I liked about them was how pragmatic he was. He had a scientific approach to religion and a spiritual approach to the scientific method. As he had a near-death experience, he says he doesn't have to have faith, or he didn't have to have faith, but that he knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, that how reality worked, how you produce reality with your consciousness. And that is why he didn't encourage people to believe or to have faith, but he told people to test these techniques, these teachings, both by reverse engineering and by present action. But as interesting and fascinating as his teachings are, no amount of theory will ever substitute practice. At some point, you actually have to test these theories for yourself. You want to see, if you want to see the results, you have to put them into practice. You have to do the work. And as long as you don't forget that you are creating your own reality all the time with your thoughts and expectations, you will be fine. Every time a disempowering thought arises, flip it into a desired thought. Every time doubt arises, bring yourself back into knowing. Simply remind yourself that fears, doubts, pessimism, discouragement are the ego's tools. The ego is in survival mode and is trying to protect you. But safety is a golden cage, and you cannot fly unless you open that imaginary door to freedom. As you have never experienced the outside world, you cannot imagine what it's like, and the unknown is scary to the ego. Yet, gifts are unknown, surprise parties are unknown, new adventures are unknown. You cannot grow and expand unless you experience the unknown, and the unknown cannot be planned. So do not try to plan, do not try to understand how things will happen. Your logical mind only knows the familiar. It cannot even imagine that which it hasn't experienced yet. Now, religion has taught us to look for an external God. We've been told that we can only go to heaven if we're good, if we follow the rules, if we're selfless. But we've misunderstood the religious scriptures. Now, according to Neville Goddard, God is consciousness, and consciousness is expressed through our imagination. Creativity is God, and we create by imagining. Because everyone is a mirror of our imagination. Everyone is reflecting back our inner self. So we would never imagine anything bad for another, as that is simply an aspect of ourselves, and it will come back to us as a boomerang. Negative thoughts ultimately harm those who are thinking them. So you want to keep the focus on yourself and your desires. Because everyone is your reflection. You can never have a negative intention without it being reflected back at you. And why would you have a negative intention if you're focused on your wishes and desires anyway? So focusing on apparent obstacles will only multiply them. It's a trap we've all fallen into. As long as you remind yourself that obstacles of any kind are not real and were simply created by your fears, they will dissolve in no time. Solutions will arise that you would never have been able to imagine with your rational mind. The hurdles you will inevitably encounter are simply showing you what you are dominantly focusing on, what you need to work on. I know your ego will scream at you that you couldn't have possibly created these horrible circumstances, but you did, unconsciously, unwittingly, unknowingly. So waste no time on anger, shame, or blame, and work on shifting the focus of your attention on the wanted and the desired. Worry not about the when and the how and the why you will receive what you want. That is beyond the scope of your rational mind. Know that it is done. I will give you some small examples of things that I've manifested in my life. They are tiny in the great big scheme of things, but it's just an example of events which the rational mind could never have predicted. So once my lawnmower broke down, it was an old model and not that common. I intended that it had been fixed within the same day for less than £80. So I took it to this place who specialized in fixing lawnmowers. The guy took a look at it and found the problem straight away. He said, we need a spare part, but the problem is they no longer make this model and therefore you cannot buy the spares anywhere. Somehow I wasn't deflated. I knew that somehow, some way it would be fixed. So I asked, are you sure it cannot be fixed without the spare part? But he was adamant and he said, we need to find a spare part for this lawnmower, and the only way we could find it is secondhand, but it will be very unlikely. These are very old models. Then he looked in shock behind me, so I turned around to see an exact copy of my lawnmower sitting in his shop, ready to be disposed of. He looked like he was in a trance as he said, wow, that is the exact same model and it cannot be fixed because a different part broke and we cannot find the spare. So I can use that lawnmower to fix yours, but it will cost you £65. I laughed out loud. And then I asked the guy whether this was a common occurrence. And his answer was as common as winning the lottery jackpot. So there you have it. Then this happened last week. My favorite floor lamp fell on the floor and the glass on top shattered into a million pieces. I was very upset. I was quite attached to the lamp. So I asked my neighbor, who knows nearly everything, and also my plumber, who is also a builder and who knows how to fix nearly everything you can think of. And both came up with exactly the same response. It's not fixable. You will need to find a spare part. And this is a 20-year-old lamp, which no longer is produced by anyone. The likelihood of you finding the exact replacement glass is 1 in a million. So I thought, here's a perfect opportunity to test the law of assumption. So I did revision, going back in my imagination to the second before breaking the lamp and changed the event. I went back to the past and never broke the lamp. Now, because I tend to be quite resistant to past revision, as it is so illogical that my rational mind tends to push it away and throws all its toys out of the pram, I then visualize myself in the future, sitting in the lounge with my lamp fixed. I figured I could spend £20 on it. Now, the next day, my neighbor suggested I buy a new one in this shop near the old airport, which I didn't even know that existed. So I went there, and there wasn't a lamp that matched the rest of the furniture in the room. And the guy there was so nice that I really wanted to buy something from him. So I felt compelled to ask, are you sure my lamp cannot be fixed? I mean, another person would have felt stupid even asking the question, but remember, I remember the lawnmower experience, so I ignored my rational mind. To my surprise, the guy answered, well, now that you mention it, we've just got a glass from an upshade for an upshade from a lamp that we couldn't fix. But to be honest, the chances that it will fit your lamp is 1 in a million. So I laughed out loud and answered cockily, "So I have a chance?" He also laughed out loud, and at this point, he was intrigued. So he said, "I tell you what, bring me the lamp and I'll take a look." I was buzzing. I brought him the lamp and he said, "No freaking way." He pulled out the glass. Now, there are hundreds of different upshades, shapes, and styles, and in different dimensions. So remember these. The glass almost fitted perfectly on my lamp, but it was slightly loose on top. So I asked him, could it be glued? He thought for a while and then he answered, "It's an experiment. I could try to fix it with silicone, but it will cost you £18 and it might not last. Are you sure you want me to try?" Long story short, I got the lamp fixed for less than I had intended, and it looks exactly like the original one. The next day, my plumber texted me to ask if I was interested in an upshade that he had found while he was fixing someone's house. And I thanked him, but sent him a picture of my fixed lamp. He replied, "How the hell?" And again, I laughed out loud. An even more unlikely example of the law of assumption in action happened to me years ago when all airports in the south of England had closed down due to dense fog, and I was stranded in Italy and needed to work in England the very next day. Now, all flights were cancelled. There was no way for me to get back, and I wanted to make it back in time for the next day, as I would risk a disciplinary action from my employer. I was really deeply upset. So I did the only thing that I knew would calm me down. I called my colleague and friend who commutes to and from England, and she knows all flights and all airports, and she's one of those people who will always find a way to get where she needs to be. Now, luckily she picked up the phone. I explained the situation, expecting her to tell me how to approach the employer and ask for emergency leave or something to that effect. Instead, I heard her frantically typing on a keyboard, and she came back with, "There is a flight from this airline X, say, who has diverted from Florence to Pisa. It is now on the runway, ready to take off in Pisa. Ask them to get you on board. Show them your crew ID." Now, I said, we don't have concessions with this airline, and it's too late to even buy a full fare ticket. Plus, I have a suitcase for the hold. There is no way they are going to accept me on board. And she replied, "Explain that it's an emergency. They will let you on. I've done it before plenty of times." So I never heard of anything like this, but I trusted her. So I hung up the phone and made my way to the desk to explain my situation and show the staff my ID. So they barely seemed to take any notice of me. They're up to their necks in trouble, trying to divert, to rebook all the passengers on different flights and so on and so forth. There's a long queue of people, so they tell me to just join the queue. Now, there are I don't know, maybe 15 people in the queue before me, all having the same problem. And the flight is obviously full because everyone's trying to make it back. And also, the flight is ready to take off on the runway. Now, I know enough about the airline business to realize that I have exactly zero chance to get on board. But since this is my only option, I relax and let go of any expectations. At the end of the day, there is nothing else I can do. I can only wait in line and face the music. A weird sense of calm comes over me. It's the release that comes from having no choice. The decision is taken out of my hands, and I have no choice but to relax and maybe ask for a miracle of sorts. Half an hour later, when I've completely let go of the hope to get on board, a staff member calls me forward and says, Can I see your ID again? So I show her my ID pass and tell her that I can pay by credit card. But she waves me off and presents me with a boarding card. I am baffled. So I ask, what is this? As my eyes cannot believe what they see. And she laughs. I thought you were a crew member. Surely you've seen a boarding card before. Sure, I reply, just not under these circumstances. Also, I have a suitcase for the hold. She points me towards the check-in desk where another colleague is reopening the flight for me. I'm in shock. This has never happened before. So I present him with my suitcase and he thinks out loud, now, how can I enter this suitcase in the system since you have no ticket and you're not meant to be on board? He goes, oh, I know, extra crew. There you go. And he gives me a receipt, like a baggage receipt. 5 minutes later, I'm on board this flight to London and I can't get my head around it. How did I get on this aircraft? None of it makes any logical sense to me. While I am boarding, the staff greets me warmly and offers me a seat in business class. You not. At this point, I'm overwhelmed with gratitude. The relief is immense. Then my friend calls me back and starts telling me about Alitalia flights still operating from Rome and Milan, but which might still be cancelled later on, as we can't predict the situation in London. She advises me to catch a train to Milan. So I tell her, my friend, I'm on board. She comes back with, the first train to Milan is at, and I interrupt her. My friend, I am on board. She says, on board what? On board that flight that was ready to depart on the runway in Pisa. You know, the one I told you about. You told me to go to the desk and present the stuff with my ID, that you've done it plenty of times. And she's silent. And then she screams, you what? I'm on board. You told me that you did it before. So she comes back with, I only told you that so you wouldn't freak out while I was looking for an alternative flight for you. What the hell? How? How did you? Then she goes, never mind. I cannot freaking believe it. And she started laughing. And that was that. And I know that your rational mind will find a million logical reasons why things happened as they did. Coincidence, luck. But here's another thing. How comes logical people have no trouble believing in luck? What is the rational and scientific explanation of luck? Yet it is a concept with which we are familiar, and therefore we tend to accept it uncritically. You know, luck is fine, but the law of assumption is weird. So do not take my word for it. Do it. Put these into practice. Know that your thoughts create, and only think those thoughts which you want to manifest. As long as you're aware that your thoughts create all the time, every time you catch yourself thinking a negative thought or unwanted things, just flip it. So remind yourself that you have the power to resolve them. Any situation in your 3D can be resolved or uncreated by the power of your imagination. One thing Neville Goddard also advised when intending for others was to ask yourself, would you want it done to you? If the answer is yes, then go ahead. Now, the reason for this, as we've seen, is not what you usually would expect. It's not because of some external judgmental God whose love is conditional to you behaving in a certain way, and it's not because of some moral code of conduct. The answer is pretty obvious, as we've seen. If everyone is you pushed out, then what you intend for others, you really intend for yourself. Once you understand that the external reality is a mirror of your subconscious, and this includes people, you could never wish another person harm, as you know that they are but an aspect of yourself. Once you understand that people you manifest in your life are simply guides who are showing you what you are focusing on, then there is no room for anger and competitiveness. You simply stop focusing on them and they will disappear from your life, from your reality, or they will show up in a completely different way. But please don't take my word for it. In fact, don't take anyone's word for it. This is not a philosophical idea, an ideology, or something I want to persuade you to believe. I have no interest in persuading anyone. I urge you, do not believe. Do not have faith. Put these ideas into practice. Every chance you get your own evidence so you know that it works. And if you're thinking, but what if I want to manifest a specific person into my life? Don't they have free will? Okay, when I manifested my lawnmower being fixed, I had to get people to align to my desire. The person who brought their lawnmower to the shop owner, etc. The same happened for the lamp, and the same happened for the flight. And this works whether you believe in it or not. People will always act according to your subconscious expectations, always without fail. So you might as well expect what you desire, expect the best. And remember, if you keep being rejected by a specific person, for instance, it's only because you are rejecting yourself. Remember, they are a mirror. They are simply mirroring your inner expectations, your deeper unconscious expectation. If you make your self-acceptance conditional to them loving you, then you are rejecting yourself. And they will keep mirroring you and showing you the same thing until you start prioritizing yourself and accepting yourself just as you are. Then the people in your life will start mirroring the same thing back to you. So this is it for today. I intend that you find this content useful and helpful. And if you did, please don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. I might do a part 2 of this video in which I will tell you about how I manifested my niece's parrot back 4 times after she flew away. Once after 2 days. So this is it for today. Have a wonderful awakened day.